Hey guys, tonight we're stepping softly through the stone passages of Helfta's cloister in the depth of winter, where frost clings to the narrow windows and the air smells faintly of beeswax and damp wool. Your footsteps echo against the flagstones, but you try to tread lighter because on the other side of these walls, women are bent over parchment by candlelight, scratching lines into their diaries while the snow outside keeps falling. You imagine yourself as one of them, wrapped in a rough wool habit, fingers stiff from the cold but warmed by the slow rhythm of writing. You're not sure the diary entry will ever be read by anyone but you and God, but still you write, because the days blur, the nights lengthen, and words give the silence shape. And yes, let's be honest, you probably wouldn't last one day here. There's no central heating, no coffee machine in the corner, and the only entertainment is listening to Sister Gertrude argue about whether St. Augustine really meant that metaphor. But somehow that deprivation turns into its own gentle comfort. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The hearth is glowing faintly in the corner, though the fire is mostly embers by now. You crouch beside it, rubbing your hands, and hear the faint crackle of resin in the logs. The cloister is wrapped in a silence so heavy it feels like snow has seeped indoors. That silence is occasionally punctured by the creak of wooden beams or the shuffle of sandals. The nuns of Helfta move quietly, their routines bound to the hours of prayer, the bells tolling matins before dawn, lauds at sunrise, and so on through the day. Each sound is a measure of time, a kind of human clock that ticks in rhythm with devotion. And yet, if you listen closely, you'll find that their diaries capture more than prayers. One line about aching fingers, another about frost inside the window panes, another about the fleeting joy of a shared joke over thin winter porridge. They are reminders that these women are not just saints in the making, but people who needed to count days, who wanted to note the difference between yesterday and tomorrow. You sit by the hearth and notice the wax dripping slowly from a taper candle. It feels almost like watching sand in an hourglass. And here's a little fact to tuck into your blanket tonight. Medieval monasteries often measured time literally by how long a candle took to burn down. If a candle was marked in sections, each portion could stand for an hour. Of course, the trouble was candles burn faster in drafts, or if the wax was mixed poorly. So your hour could be 40 minutes on a breezy day. Historians still argue whether these imprecisions mattered much, or whether time was looser back then, less about exact minutes and more about rhythms. A gentle joke slides in. You can imagine Sister Mechtild sighing, "I'll meet you after one candle," and her friend replying, "Fat chance, the candle was cheap from the village." Not exactly the atomic clock. But while the Helfta nuns scribbled their moments by candle measure, far away across the ocean another people were busy tying time not to wax or bells, but to something that grew straight from the soil. You shift in your seat, close your eyes, and picture yourself being carried, not in body, but in thought, out of this freezing German cloister. South, then west, over restless seas, across jungles, until you stand barefoot in the warm earth of a Maya cornfield. The scent changes first, damp clay, sharp green stalks, smoke from a distant cooking fire. The sun is heavy on your shoulders, so unlike the weak northern light you left behind. Around you, maize plants stretch in rows, their leaves rustling in the breeze. They aren't just food here, they are the clock face itself, each sprout and earmarking times passing. The Maya did not just plant corn to eat, they planted it to read. The rhythm of sowing, sprouting, tasseling, and harvesting was a sacred calendar, a diary written not in ink but in green shoots. Each growth stage mirrored a portion of the solar year. For them, corn was not simply sustenance, it was the body of time itself. That sounds poetic, but it was also practical. Farmers knew exactly when to expect the rains, when to burn the fields, when to store seeds for next season. And yet, here's the quirky tidbit. the Maya didn't always separate sais from story. A crooked row of stalks might mean the gods were displeased. A particularly plump cob might be taken as a good omen for a wedding. Even now, scholars still argue whether the Maya farmers were guided more by observation or by ritual. Perhaps both, intertwined so tightly you can't tell them. Apartment back in Helfta, the nun writing in her diary can only dream of such fields. For her, maize is an exotic grain she'll never taste, mentioned only in travellers' tales. But she too is measuring time by the bells, the dripping wax, the prayers that repeat with metronomic patience. And here you are, slipping between them both, one candle guttering in Saxony, one corn sprout pushing through Central American soil. You realize something. Whether in cold cloisters or hot fields, humans crave a way to know where they stand in the endless river of days. Sometimes that's a diary line about frost. Sometimes it's a maize stalk leaning toward the sun. The candle in Helfta sputters lower. The rustle of parchment grows softer. And in the cornfield the breeze rattles the dry leaves like a paper fan. You're caught between two worlds, two clocks, both imperfect, both strangely comforting. And as your eyelids get heavier, you might even think maybe it doesn't matter if an hour is 40 minutes or if a stalk of corn predicts the rains. What matters is that someone cared enough to notice, to write it down, to read the field or the flame, and to say, yes, time passed, and I was here to see it. The moment you close your eyes against the candlelight of Helfta, you find yourself ankle-deep in soil, the furrows of a Maya cornfield spreading out in every direction like lines in a giant ledger. The air is heavy, damp with humidity, the kind that sticks to your skin and makes you wish you'd packed a fan. Somewhere nearby, a parrot calls from the trees, its cry sharp as a bell. The stalks sway gently and you realize you're standing inside a clock face that never stops ticking. You bend down and press your fingers into the dirt. It's warm, almost alive, and in it, kernels of maize are resting, each one destined to become a stalk, a meal, and, most important tonight, a marker of time. For the Maya, cornfields weren't just for feeding families, they were calendars. Each sprout, each tassel, each ear was a note in the song of the year. While monks in Helfta counted hours by candles, here in the Yucatan, people measured months by green shoots pushing through the earth. One mainstream fact worth tucking under your pillow: the Maya used a solar calendar of 365 days, divided into 18 months of 20 days, plus a short, unlucky stretch of 5 days at the end. They kept another sacred 260-day calendar woven into rituals, divinations, and festivals. It sounds complicated, but somehow they wove these together with the rhythm of the maize. Planting season aligned with certain day names, harvest with others, and people read the growth of corn as a confirmation that the heavens and the earth were still in sync. You push aside a leaf and notice a sprout just beginning to unfurl, its tender green curling toward the sun. A farmer nearby, bare feet caked with mud, crouches beside it and nods as if he's reading a page of scripture. For him, this is not just a plant, but a signal. He knows the rains are coming. He knows how long until the next ceremony. And he probably knows that you, the stranger gawking at his corn, are hopelessly behind on weeding. And here's the quirky tidbit. Some accounts suggest that Maya farmers actually listened to corn. They'd lean down, ears close to the stalks, waiting for the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. Was it superstition? Maybe. Or maybe it was a poetic way of saying they paid close attention to subtle changes in weather and plant growth. Modern agronomists would call it micro-observation. The Maya would just call it common sense. Of course, historians still argue whether maize truly structured the calendar, or if it was simply one thread among many. Was the cornfield the clock, or just a mirror reflecting what the heavens already decreed? Some scholars say the calendar was strictly mathematical, independent of crops. Others insist the fields were central, living testaments to time itself. Like a debate between monks over how many angels could dance on a pin, no final answer exists, but the discussion itself is oddly soothing, like listening to rain on thatched roofs, The field stretches on, the stalks forming neat rows that vanish into the horizon. You walk between them, brushing your hands along the leaves. Every rustle feels like a whisper. Time is moving, time is moving. It's so different from Helfta's bells and candles, and yet strangely the same. The nuns write their diaries to mark days. The Maya plant corn to mark seasons. Both are attempts to wrestle with the great slippery eel that is time. You pause, crouch down again, and dig gently into the soil, pulling up a single kernel that failed to sprout. It's small, shriveled, almost apologetic. And for a moment you wonder, did someone notice this too, centuries ago? Did they worry what a failed seed might mean? Was it a bad omen for the harvest, or just part of farming's eternal gamble? You imagine a Maya farmer shrugging, tossing the dud aside, then glancing at the sky to see if the clouds promised rain. A little joke sneaks in here. Compared to your own houseplants, which die the moment you so much as look at them funny, the Maya's cornfield seems almost miraculous. No wonder they turned it into a calendar. You can barely keep a basil plant alive long enough to season pasta. The sun dips lower, the shadows stretch longer, and you realize the field itself is a kind of sundial. The angle of light against the stalk shifts slowly, just as a candle's flame shortens in Helfta. The only difference is that here, the clock is green and growing, instead of melting into wax. You hear distant drums from a village, steady beats that align with your footsteps, and for a moment you could swear the whole world is moving in time with the corn. Somewhere deep inside you, the image of the Helfta nuns lingers, women scratching ink lines onto parchment, their diaries marking frost, bells, and prayers. Here, in contrast, farmers scratch furrows into soil, marking kernels, rains, and festivals. Two kinds of diaries, two kinds of scripture. The parrot squawks again, impatient with your daydreaming, and you smile. Whether in parchment lines or corn rows, people just need to know what time it is. You brush the soil from your fingers, stand tall among the stalks, and keep walking. The cornfield murmurs, the earth exhales warmth, and the calendar keeps on ticking, kernel by kernel, leaf by leaf. You keep walking between the rows, and soon the field opens up into a wider clearing. Here the stalks are taller, tassels swaying in the breeze, golden silk catching the sunlight like threads in a vast tapestry. You slow your pace, realizing that every stage of growth around you is another tick on the Maya clock. Sprouting, tasseling, flowering, fruiting, drying, all of it a rhythm that farmers knew as intimately as their own breath. The Maya had no pocket watches, no cathedral bells tolling the hours. Instead, they counted time in kernels. The first sprout marked the start of the cycle. The young green shoots meant the rains had arrived right on schedule. As the stalks grew taller, their height showed not just progress but also precision, like marks on a ruler stretching across months. When the tassels burst into pollen, people knew the midpoint of the season had arrived. By the time ears fattened, calendars were lining up with festivals, rituals, and markets. And when husks dried to papery rattles, the year was preparing to close, making way for another round. Here's your mainstream historical fact to tuck under your blanket. Maya agriculturalists aligned their planting season with the solar year, carefully observing the sun's position on the horizon. At the spring equinox, villages held ceremonies to bless the first sowing of maize, and months later, when the autumn equinox arrived, harvest festivals filled plazas with music, dance, and corn piled high like treasure. The plant itself was more than food, it was proof that heaven's cycles and earth's soil were in harmony. You crouch down to inspect a half-grown ear, silk threads still sticky with pollen. A farmer would see this and calculate, the corn is halfway, the rains are steady, the festivals are near. You, on the other hand, just think it looks like popcorn waiting to happen. And yes, you can almost hear the butter sizzling, but don't let the villagers catch you drooling on their sacred calendar. And here's the quirky tidbit. Some Maya groups believed that certain kernels held messages from the gods. A streak of unusual color, a double ear fused together, or a stalk that grew faster than the rest could be interpreted as omens. Maybe a good harvest, maybe a warning of sickness, maybe a sign that someone in the village should avoid traveling that month. It's a reminder that the line between agriculture and divination was thin, and that even dinner could whisper prophecies if you looked closely enough. Historians still argue whether this reading of maize was widespread ritual or occasional superstition. Was it central to the whole Maya worldview, or was it more like how some modern folks won't walk under ladders? The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. For some, kernels were divine messages, for others, just dinner. And that debate hums softly in the background, like bees moving from tassel to tassel. You lean back, stretching your arms and gaze across the field. It's like standing inside a calendar laid out in rows, each stalk another day, each tassel another week. Imagine trying to explain this to the nuns at Helfta. "Oh yes, sister, instead of counting candle marks, we just watch corn grow." You'd get a raised eyebrow, maybe a lecture about vanity, and then a reminder that wax, at least, doesn't get eaten by worms. The sun beats warmly on your shoulders, and you hear laughter from children chasing each other at the field's edge. Even they know what stage of the corn means what. Their parents have taught them to recognize tassels, husks, and silk threads because these aren't just biology, they're timekeepers. A child might know it's festival season not because of a calendar date, but because the ears are just fat enough for roasting. Another joke slips in here. Honestly, this is the only calendar where you can eat your mistakes. If you missed a festival date, at least you had grilled corn for dinner. The air grows heavy with the scent of pollen, and when you brush your hand against a tassel, golden dust coats your fingers. You rub it absent-mindedly, thinking how fragile and yet reliable this process is. Year after year, sprout after sprout, it keeps happening. Even if storms come, even if a crop fails, the cycle itself is unbroken. And that cycle, visible, edible, undeniable, is what made maize such a natural clock for the Maya. The stalks around you sway in rhythm with the breeze. It's almost hypnotic. You think of Helfta again, of the flicker of candles and the measured drip of wax. Both are fragile, both fleeting, but both are counted carefully by people who long to tether themselves to something larger than their own fleeting days. The field stretches on, tassels nodding like heads in prayer. The calendar is alive all around you, whispering softly, "Count me, remember me, let me mark your days." And as you walk forward, the rows narrow again, closing around you like the pages of a book written not in ink, but in kernels. The cornfield grows denser as you walk, the green leaves brushing against your shoulders, the stalks towering over your head like a living cathedral. You push forward until the rows suddenly part, and there before you rises a stone temple, stepped and massive, its shadow falling directly onto the maize. For a moment you blink, because it feels as if the heavens and the earth have agreed to meet here. The stalks rising from soil, the stones rising from rock, both pointing toward the sky. You tip your head back and notice the constellations faintly visible in the dusky light. The sun is lowering and the first stars are pricking through the horizon haze. Now comes the secret most visitors never realize. Those constellations aren't just pretty, they are perfectly aligned with the fields themselves. The Maya placed their furrows to echo the heavens, so that what grew below mirrored what glowed above. Here's a grounded historical fact. Maya astronomers carefully tracked the Pleiades, Venus, and other celestial markers, aligning temple stairways and planting dates with their risings and settings. When Venus first appeared as the morning star, it could signal war or ritual. When the Pleiades reached certain points, farmers knew rains were due. And in between, the slow tilt of the sun across the horizon helped chart sowing and harvest. You step into the temple's shadow and glance back across the rows of corn. From here, the lines seem to stretch like rays pointing to the horizon, just where a bright star will rise. It's as if the earth itself has been carved into a sundial of soil. You almost expect the corn to bow when the star appears. A quirky tidbit rustles in with the breeze. In some villages, people claimed that the sound of wind in the corn leaves could echo the chatter of the gods. A certain pitch meant rain, another meant heat, and sometimes, just sometimes, it was taken as the voice of ancestors speaking. Imagine explaining that to a skeptical medieval nun. "Yes, sister, the corn told me the weather forecast." She'd probably mutter something about heresy and recommend another round of prayers. Historians still argue whether these alignments were intentional or coincidental. Did Maya farmers really plant their rows with the stars in mind, or did the alignments only emerge because everything in their world was already so celestial? Some archaeologists say it was deliberate engineering. Others caution that human eyes are too eager to find patterns. But you stand here, and the pattern feels undeniable, like a mirror connecting sky to soil. You take a few steps up the stone stairs, feeling the chill of the stone under your hands, and look again at the horizon. The first real stars now shimmer against the deepening blue. You think of Helfta, of candlelight trembling in a draughty chapel. There too the women looked upward, not to Mays or Pleiades, but to the heavens through stained glass and prayer. Different symbols, same yearning. Another light joke slips in, at least the stars are reliable. Unlike your phone's weather app, which insists it's sunny while you're standing in the rain, the stars didn't get it wrong often enough to lose credibility. Farmers knew if Venus was in a certain place, their corn had better be in the ground or else. The field rustles louder now, as if stirred by something more than wind. You close your eyes and listen. It's a chorus of time, storks whispering below, stars blinking above. You are standing between two clocks, one green and rooted, one glittering and infinite. The temple steps lead higher, but you don't climb further. Instead, you remain here at the meeting point where Mays and constellations cross. You imagine a Maya priest raising his hands, one hand holding a kernel, the other pointing skyward, both gestures meaning the same thing. To measure time, you must watch what grows and what glows. Back in Helfta, Sister Mechtild scratches another diary line about frost on the sill, using candle flame as her measure. You smile because across an ocean and centuries, another farmer scratches a furrow in soil, letting a kernel tell him the hour. Two diaries, one in parchment, one in corn. The stars sharpen, the leaves keep rustling, and your place between them feels like stepping inside a cosmic balance scale. Sky above, soil below, and you, right there in the middle, counting both. The stars blink steadily overhead, and you keep walking, drawn deeper into the hush of the cornfield. Soon the rows break apart again, and you find yourself standing at the edge of a clearing. Here, the ground is uneven, scattered with flat stones that look suspiciously like pages torn from an enormous stone book. You crouch down and run your fingers over one, grooves and spirals cut into its surface like doodles, though you know better. These are not doodles, they are calendars, coded into rock. The Maya were obsessed with calendars the way modern people are obsessed with notifications. They didn't just have one calendar, they had several, layered and interlocking like gears in a clock. One was the 260-day ritual calendar called the Tzolkin, guiding ceremonies and naming days. Another was the 365-day Harb, matching the solar year. And when the two meshed together in a cycle of 18,980 days, about 52 years, it was called a calendar round, a great cosmic reset button. You trace the spiral grooves again, noticing how they curl into each other, endless, like a hypnotic doodle you might sketch in a boring meeting. Only this one held the destiny of entire cities. A child born on one date might be destined to be a farmer, another, born on a different alignment, could be a warrior, priest, or poet. You probably wouldn't want to know what yours said. Imagine reading, "Oh, congratulations, your fate is to endlessly refresh your inbox." Truly cursed. Meanwhile, in Helfta, a nun writes down feast days and saints' vigils in her diary, tethering time to holy rhythms. The contrast tickles you. On one side of the world, a corn calendar determines whether you'll plant beans today. On the other, a saint's day determines whether you'll eat beans at all. Both, in their own ways, turn the ordinary into sacred scheduling. Here's a mainstream fact to anchor this stroll. The Maya long count calendar famously tracked time in vast cycles, counting days since a mythic creation date in 3114 BCE. This is the one that sparked the 2012 apocalypse buzz, when modern readers misunderstood it as predicting the end of the world. In truth, it was more like flipping a calendar page. Worlds didn't end, but cycles renewed. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some glyphs carved into these calendars also doubled as riddles or jokes. Scholars have found playful insertions like faces with exaggerated noses or animals in odd poses slipped into otherwise serious inscriptions. Imagine slipping a doodle of a cat meme into a spreadsheet. Same mischievous energy. Who says ancient record-keeping was dry? Historians still argue whether common farmers actually understood these cosmic cycles or if they were kept as priestly secrets. Some insist villagers lived their days by what the corn and weather demanded, while only elites tracked the grand celestial wheels. Others argue that even the simplest farmer knew the sacred interplay of 260 and 365 because it shaped rituals they couldn't avoid. You can feel the tension in the stones as though they're daring you to pick a side. You stand again, brushing dirt from your palms, and glance at the sky. The stars feel heavier now, almost pressing down, as though the heavens themselves are participating in the scheduling. You imagine a nun in Helfta holding a wax tablet, struggling to scratch notes with frozen fingers, and a Maya priest hunched over a stone like this one, carving spirals under a blazing sun. Both were doing the same thing, wrestling time into something graspable, like trying to catch a waterfall in your hands. Another light joke drifts in. You wonder what would happen if the nun and the priest swapped calendars. The nun would stare at 260 spiraling glyphs and declare them demonic. The priest would stare at a saint's feast day and ask, "Is this the god of lentils or of snow?" Neither would get their chores done, but the confusion would be worth watching. The clearing feels oddly alive, as if the stones themselves hum faintly with centuries of counting. You sit for a moment, close your eyes, and let the rhythm wash over you. 260 beats, 365 beats, interlocked into cycles that never quite end. A cosmic metronome, keeping everything from planting to praying in order. When you open your eyes again, the corn still sways, and the stars above keep their own rhythm. Somewhere, Sister Mechtild's candle is sputtering lower, measuring night by inches of melting wax. And here, in a cornfield, thousands of miles away, the cosmos measures night by degrees of the Pleiades' climb. Two diaries, both written without ink, yet equally faithful. You stand feeling the weight of centuries in your chest and take one step deeper into the night, calendars ticking softly beneath your feet. The night deepens, though time itself seems to be bending, folding in on itself the way the corn rows twist when the wind cuts across the field. You keep walking, and the stalks thin into a narrow path. It leads you to a small, raised mound, an ancient platform, its edges worn but unmistakably deliberate. You climb it, feeling the crunch of gravel and soil, and from here the view shifts. The stars seem aligned, the horizon marked like the rim of a giant sundial. This is no accident. The Maya didn't just farm corn, they farmed the sky. Temples and platforms like this one often aligned precisely with solstices, equinoxes, or the rising of Venus. The entire landscape was treated as a calendar. A shadow crossing a stairway at dawn or the exact point the sun vanished behind a mountain was as much a clock as any mechanical ticking hand. You imagine leaning against the cool stone, waiting, watching, and then gasping as the sun slipped into place like a golden bead through a thread. Meanwhile, back in Helfta, the nuns practiced their own form of sky-watching. Their calendar was studied with feast days keyed to astronomical events, Easter, for example, tethered to the spring equinox and the full moon. They weren't carving glyphs into stone, but they still needed the heavens to know when to celebrate or fast. Sister Gertrude might note, The moon was high, and so tomorrow we prepare for the Passion, scribbling by firelight as her ink thickened with the cold. Here's your mainstream fact. Venus, for the Maya, was more than a pretty morning star. It was associated with war and renewal. Its cycle tracked meticulously across 584 days. Priests timed raids and battles with its rising and setting, believing that aligning action with Venus's rhythm increased their chances of victory. Think of it as the cosmic equivalent of checking your horoscope before scheduling a big meeting, except instead of avoiding Mercury retrograde, you might be launching a city-wide invasion. And now the quirky tidbit. Some temple staircases were designed to act as serpent illusions. During certain days of the year, the shadows cast by the sun created the image of a snake slithering down the stone steps. Tourists today flock to see this at Chichen Itza, but can you imagine the first time villagers witnessed it? A snake made of light and shadow sliding across the pyramid. It must have felt like the gods themselves were playing shadow puppets. Historians still argue whether these grand alignments were carefully engineered from the start, or whether later generations noticed coincidences and built myths around them. Was the pyramid designed with serpent shadows in mind, or did villagers later point at the stairway and say, "Oh look, Kukulkan just popped by for the festival"? The debate lingers, reminding you how slippery the past can be. You sit cross-legged on the mound, listening to the rustle of leaves. The cornfield feels less like a farm and more like a theatre, the stalks bowing in time with celestial spotlights. Your own body is just another marker of time. You, standing here, breathing in 2025, overlapping with footprints pressed thousands of years ago. And somewhere in medieval Germany, a nun records her pulse in prayer, her diary becoming a private astronomy of devotion. A joke sneaks in as you imagine a Maya priest and a Helfta nun chatting. Priest: "We time our battles with Venus." Nun: "We time our Lent with the moon." Priest: "Ah, so you're farmers too." Nun sighs in Latin. The humour rests lightly, but you sense the deeper similarity. Both traditions tried to make sense of time by braiding human rhythms into cosmic ones. One carved stone snakes, the other lit beeswax candles. Both were ways of saying, we belong to something bigger than ourselves. The platform beneath you hums with memory. Or maybe it's just the breeze slipping through cracks in the stone. You close your eyes and imagine waiting all night for the dawn, heart beating faster as the horizon glows. To witness the sun fall exactly into a temple notch or rise between two stone towers, it must have felt like catching the universe nodding back at you as if to say, yes, you're on time. You open your eyes again and the cornfield is patient, swaying around you like waves. In Helfta, a nun waits for bells to toll midnight. In the Yucatan, a priest waits for Venus to blink awake. Both mark the hours not by machines but by light, shadow, and faith. You climb down from the mound, back onto the narrow dirt path, ready to follow it deeper into this woven diary of stars and stalks. The path narrows until you feel the corn brushing your shoulders, stalks whispering secrets like nosy neighbors in an apartment hallway. You duck under a bent row and suddenly the space opens into a clearing. At the center sits a squat stone altar, blackened from centuries of offerings. While beyond, the sky seems darker, deeper, as though this is a pocket where the stars lean closer. You crouch near the altar, brushing dust from its surface. In Maya culture, ritual wasn't confined to grand pyramids. Altars like this were scattered across fields and villages, places where daily offerings of maize, cacao, or copal incense stitched the sacred into the ordinary. Farmers asked for rain, mothers for health, rulers for cosmic favor. You can almost smell the sweet resin burning, the air sticky with smoke curling upward, a smoky telegram to the heavens. Back in Helfta, rituals saturated daily life too, though their altars were polished wood and draped in linen rather than carved stone. Nuns bowed at canonical hours, matins, lauds, vespers, each prayer not just a plea, but a way of binding themselves into divine rhythm. Imagine a weary sister scribbling in her winter diary. Tonight, the bells tolled. and though my hands were frozen, my voice still joined the chant. 2 worlds apart, yet both whispering up into the night sky, convinced someone, or something, was listening. Mainstream fact time. The Popol Vuh, the Maya creation story, tells how humans were first made of maize dough after earlier attempts with mud and wood failed. Corn wasn't just dinner, it was literally the flesh of humanity. Every ritual with maize was both agricultural insurance and cosmic self-preservation. No wonder offerings of corn kernels at altars carried such weight. It was like sacrificing a tiny piece of yourself back to the gods. Here's the quirky tidbit. Sometimes Maya rituals involved bloodletting, and not just from warriors. Nobles and even queens pierced their tongues or earlobes, dripping blood onto paper that was then burned, the smoke carrying prayers skyward. Imagine hosting a modern prayer circle and someone suddenly says, "Okay, everyone pass the needle, we're texting the gods tonight." It's both unsettling and fascinating, a visceral reminder that for the Maya, devotion demanded skin in the game, literally. Historians still argue whether every farmer practiced these offerings or if ritual bloodletting was reserved mostly for elites and priests. Some evidence suggests common folk mainly offered food and incense, while others believe even village gatherings might involve smaller-scale blood sacrifice. The ambiguity leaves you picturing a Maya town square, half the people holding maize baskets, the other half eyeing sharpened stingray spines with nervous anticipation. You touch the cold stone altar in the clearing and imagine Gertrude of Helfta leaning over her wooden lectern, quill scratching. Her diary entries often described visions, prayers, and intimate encounters with the divine. Some scholars even call them love letters to God. Compare that with a Maya priest slicing his skin to let blood drip onto maize paper. Different methods, same yearning. How do I reach beyond myself and how do I prove I mean it? For a fleeting second, the clearing feels like a cathedral without walls. The stalks rise as pillars, the night sky domes above as a ceiling fretted with stars, and the altar stands like an ancient pulpit. You kneel there, hearing distant echoes of chanting, Latin hymns from Helfta, layered over Maya drums like 2 radio stations caught on the same frequency. And then comes the joke, sneaking sideways into your imagination. None. We give up meat for Lent. Priest, we give up blood, sometimes ours. None. Blink, blink, it's so vegan? The laughter is soft, but it takes the edge off the solemnity. You realize these rituals, however extreme, were human attempts to bargain with forces bigger than weather, bigger than war, bigger even than mortality. Everyone wanted reassurance that their whispered prayers or their dripping blood or their carefully sung psalms actually reached the cosmic inbox. You look at the altar one last time. The shadows curl like smoke, though no fire burns. Maybe memory itself leaves residue, staining stone with what has been repeated 1,000 times. You rise, brushing off your knees, and step back into the stalks. Behind you, the altar stands silent, waiting for the next hand to place maize kernels, or the next heart to whisper into the dark. Ahead, the path coils deeper into the diary's pages, and you follow, breath slowed, ears pricked, as though the corn itself might start chanting. You push through another row of stalks, the ground squelching under your boots. The earth feels warmer here, like it has soaked up centuries of offerings. When you emerge, the space is stranger than before. Rows of carved stones, each etched with glyphs, arranged in a semicircle, facing east. Their shapes remind you of crooked teeth jutting up from the soil. The stones seem to hum, though you know it's probably just the wind slipping through the corn like a choir warming up. This is where you stumble into the Maya calendar, or rather, where it ambushes you. Imagine living in a world where you track time not by your wristwatch or Google Calendar, but by 2 intricate wheels of days interlocking like gears. The Maya had the 260-day sacred calendar, the Tzolk'in, and the 365-day solar year, the Hab. Together they formed a repeating 52-year cycle, the calendar round. To them, each day had a personality, a fate, a whisper of divine significance. Forget Tuesday at 3 p.m. meeting. Imagine instead, today is 3 dear, a day charged with destiny, and suddenly even buying tortillas feels like participating in cosmic choreography. In Helfta, the nuns lived by a calendar too, but theirs ticked with prayers, feasts and fasting. Winter entries often repeat the cycle: vigils, matins, prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, compline. Hours chopped up not for appointments but for songs. And just like the Maya calendars, each day carried flavor, some days somber with fasting, others jubilant with feast days for saints. One nun scribbled, "The hours stretch long, yet in their rhythm I lose the cold." Both calendars turn time from a blank container into a story. Mainstream fact: Maya astronomer priests were so skilled that they tracked the solar year more precisely than Europe's Julian calendar of the same era. Their calculations of Venus's cycle, 584 days, were almost exact. No telescopes, no spreadsheets, just careful, naked-eye observations recorded on bark paper codices. Imagine an ancient priest shrugging, "Yep, Venus will rise here on Thursday," and then watching the planet pop up right on cue. Quirky tidbit. The Maya also believed each day in the Tzolk'in calendar had a day lord, basically a divine personality. If today's lord was moody, maybe you'd postpone a trip or a harvest. It's like living under an eternal horoscope, except instead of Mercury is in retrograde, you'd hear, "Ah yes, today is 8 Jaguar, don't plant beans unless you want them haunted." You chuckle, realizing even back then, people blamed bad crops on bad vibes. Historians still argue whether ordinary farmers fully understood the complexities of the calendars or if the system was primarily a priestly monopoly. Some evidence suggests that while priests kept the grand celestial ledgers, farmers relied on practical seasonal markers, the corn itself, to decide when to plant or harvest. The debate feels familiar. In Helfta, did every nun grasp the intricacies of the liturgical calendar, or did they just follow the bells? Maybe in both worlds, only specialists tracked the hidden math, while everyone else simply lived inside its rhythm. The stones around you seem to click, like gears turning. You picture the calendar round in motion, two wheels interlocking, days colliding, repeating, but never exactly the same. Time isn't a line here, it's a spiral. And suddenly you recall the Helfta diary entries, looping with prayer after prayer, day after day, yet never written in identical ink. Even repetition carves new meaning. You grin at the thought of a nun and a Maya priest having a scheduling argument. Nun: "We celebrate St. Agnes on January 21st. Priest: "Ah, but that's 7 wind in the Tzolk'in, terrible omen." Nun: "Fine. So, how's Tuesday?" The absurdity softens the edge of all this cosmic seriousness, because under the weight of calendars, sacred or solar, humans are still trying to wrangle time, to make it manageable, to pretend they can hold the days steady between their palms. You step closer to one of the carved stones. The glyphs curl like vines, each one a knot of sound and meaning. Your fingers trace a groove, and for a moment you almost hear it speak, not words, but a pulse, steady as a heartbeat. Behind it, you see the shadow of a nun's candlelight, her diary entry muttering about hours and vigils, echoing the same pulse. 2 calendars, 2 hemispheres, but the same obsession. Make sense of the passing days before they swallow you. The corn rustles, tugged by the wind. You tilt your head back, and above you stars prick the sky in their own eternal rhythm. You wonder if the nuns ever looked up from their icy dormitory windows, whispering a psalm, while halfway across the world a Maya farmer squinted skyward, marking Venus's rise. Time layered itself on both of them, each note of the cosmic clock reminding them they were tiny but not insignificant. You let out a slow breath. The stones loom, the corn sways, and the diary whispers. You step forward into the spiral of days, carried now not just by your own footsteps, but by calendars that never really ended, just folded back on themselves, like dreams you've had before, but can't quite remember until they repeat. The rows thin until you stumble into a wide clearing, and suddenly the quiet is broken by noise, human noise. A marketplace stretches before you, alive with chatter, bargaining, laughter, and the shuffle of feet. The smell of roasted maize mingles with smoke, sweat, and the sweet tang of fermented drinks. Women squat behind baskets overflowing with corn cobs, beans, peppers, cacao pods. Men haggle over obsidian blades, cotton cloth, and bundles of dried herbs. Children chase each other between stalls, their laughter threading through the low hum of commerce. But listen closely. Beneath the ordinary chaos of buying and selling, there's a deeper rhythm at play. The Maya marketplace wasn't just economic, it was cosmic. The phases of the moon and the turning of the Tzolk'in calendar often dictated when markets opened, when certain goods were traded, and at what price. Today's corn value wasn't just about supply. It might also hinge on whether the day was auspicious or cursed. Imagine if your local grocery store raised avocado prices because Saturn was in a bad mood. Mainstream fact, archaeological evidence shows that Maya cities like Chichen Itza and Calakmul had designated market plazas. Goods flowed along vast trade networks, linking highland obsidian quarries, coastal salt pans, and fertile lowland maize farms. Currency wasn't coins, but cacao beans, cotton mantles, and even worked jade. A handful of cacao beans could buy you a turkey egg. A rabbit might set you back 2 or 3 cotton cloaks. Every transaction was tethered both to earthly value and celestial timing. Quirky tidbit: in some Maya towns, market days aligned with the 20-day winal cycle of their calendar. That meant villagers had a predictable rhythm, like a rotating farmer's market, but one infused with ritual. Certain foods were thought to sell better on certain days. If you tried to sell tamales on an unlucky day, well, good luck moving your stock. You laugh to yourself, even the corn had customer service issues. The debates here among historians center on how centralized the market system really was. Some scholars argue these exchanges were tightly overseen by rulers and priestly elites who enforced taxes and dictated sacred timing. Others claim that much of the trade was grassroots, farmer to farmer, family to family, regulated more by local custom than royal decree. The truth is likely somewhere in between, a grand web, half divine choreography, half human hustle. And then, like a ghost, Helfta drifts back in. Picture a German convent in winter, far from maize fields and market squares. The nuns' economy was smaller, enclosed, food stored in pantries, beer brewed in cellars, wool spun by hand. But they, too, lived by rhythms that went beyond practicality. Their meals and fasts rose and fell with the liturgical calendar. A simple bowl of porridge could taste different depending on whether it was Lent or Christmas. A loaf of bread wasn't just calories, it was communion, sacrament. You imagine one of the Helfta sisters writing in her diary, "The pantry is low, yet tonight we feast in the joy of the Nativity." Her words rhyme across centuries and continents, with a Maya vendor muttering, "The moon is right, today the maize sells well." In both places, survival fused with symbolism, eating, buying, selling, never just mundane. Always timed, always tinged with something sacred. The market around you surges, a rising tide of voices. Someone beats a drum, its rhythm syncing with your heartbeat. A woman hands you a tamale wrapped in steaming corn husk. You bite it, and it tastes like warmth, like ritual, like history, wrapped in spice. For a moment you see the nuns again, hands clasped at the refectory table, candles flickering as they chant before supper. The tamale and the bread dissolve together, both flavored with time. You smile at the absurd idea of a nun bartering at this market. Nun: "I'll trade you 3 psalms for that cacao." Vendor: "Only if it's a feast day's psalm." The market laughs with you, or maybe at you. It doesn't matter, the joke feels true. As the moon rises above the clearing, vendors pack up, baskets lifted, voices fading into the trees. The rhythm of buying and selling collapses back into silence, just as the convent's meals dissolve back into prayer. You're left standing with a half-eaten tamale in one hand, the Helfta diary in the other, and the strange sense that you've just attended 2 markets at once, one of goods, one of grace. The tamale warmth lingers on your tongue as the night air cools, and you drift along a narrow trail cut deep into the jungle floor. The moon's glow trickles down through the canopy, guiding you towards something older, something carved in stone. The trees part, and you see it, a stela rising like a frozen flame. Its surface is etched with glyphs so intricate they seem alive, snakes curling, maize sprouting, gods watching with wide, unblinking eyes. You run your fingers across the grooves, tracing the raised lines, and suddenly you realize these are more than carvings. They're calendars, written in stone. The Maya obsession with time wasn't abstract. They measured it, mapped it, and recorded it with dizzying precision. Stelae like this one served as historical billboards, births of kings, wars, dedications of temples, but always tied to calendar dates. The long count system could trace back to the mythic creation date in 3114 BCE, a number so large you need a nap just thinking about it. Every event was tethered to cycles of 260 days, 365 days, 52 years, and grander cosmic spans. Imagine if your social media posts came stamped not just with the day and hour, but also with cosmic coordinates stretching into infinity. Mainstream fact, archaeologists have documented how Maya inscriptions align events with celestial phenomena. Eclipses, solstices, and planetary movements were logged alongside coronations and battles. Kings proved legitimacy by syncing their reigns with cosmic rhythms. Time wasn't a backdrop, it was the stage itself. To rule meant to demonstrate you could read the script of the stars. Quirky tidbit. Some stelae don't just mark dates, they talk trash. Inscriptions sometimes mock defeated rivals, bragging about battles, or even exaggerating victories. Think of it as ancient Twitter beef, except carved in limestone. Somewhere, an artisan was giggling as he chiseled, "Oh, and by the way, their maize harvest was pathetic." And here's the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether ordinary Maya farmers could actually read these glyphs or whether they were the exclusive language of scribes and elites. Did villagers standing before this very stela understand its symbols, or did it just radiate mystery, like standing before a cathedral fresco you can't quite decode? The stela towers over you, its presence almost heavy. You glance down at the Helfta diary still clutched in your hand, and suddenly the inked Latin letters feel like a sibling to these stone glyphs. Different alphabets, different worlds, but both wrestling to capture time. A nun in Germany scratches dates of fasts and feasts into parchment, anchoring her fleeting days to a sacred cycle. A Maya scribe chisels a ruler's triumph, binding it to the eternal churn of the calendar. Both acts whisper the same human desire: don't let this moment slip away. You picture Sister Gertrude in Helfta, shivering as she leans over her diary by candlelight. Today, snow fell heavy, but our voices rose in song. Then you imagine a Maya carver bent under the sun, hammering glyphs. Today our king grasped maize and fire under the gaze of Venus. The ink and the chisel echo across time, fragile and permanent all at once. You chuckle, thinking how exasperated the Maya scribe and the Helfta nun would be with you. Nun: write your diary properly, not with jokes about crocodile dung. Scribe: stop interrupting the long count with avocado memes. You: look, I'm just trying to stay awake. The stone hums beneath your hand as if it disapproves of your sarcasm, and for a moment you feel dizzy, caught between frozen eternity and fleeting mortality. The glyphs stare back, stern and patient. You realize that for both the Maya and the Helfta nuns, recording time wasn't just bookkeeping, it was survival, a way to tether fragile human lives to something that wouldn't crumble overnight. The jungle presses close again, cicadas buzzing as you step back from the monument. The stela fades behind you, swallowed by vines, but its weight lingers, carved into your mind like your own private calendar. And when you blink, you see a nun's neat handwriting hovering beside the glyphs, both scripts whispering the same thing: remember us. Your footsteps crunch on the jungle floor until the path beneath you softens, and suddenly you're stepping into fields, Rows of maize stretch out under a paling dawn sky, their leaves rustling like gossiping cloister sisters. Here it is, the heart of Maya timekeeping, not carved in stone, not scratched on parchment, but alive and green, swaying with the breeze. Cornfields were clocks. You run your hand across a stalk, and the silken tassels whisper back, counting days in kernels instead of numbers. For the Maya, maize wasn't just food, it was life, myth, and calendar rolled into one. Their creation story says humans were formed from corn dough, kneaded and shaped by gods who were probably better bakers than you on your best sourdough attempt. Planting cycles became calendars. When the first rains came, seeds went into the ground. The sprouting leaves marked weeks, tasseling told of months, and harvest sealed the year. Forget your smartwatch. This was agriculture's ticking hand, guiding festivals, offerings, and the rhythm of village life. Mainstream fact: Maya farmers timed planting with the Pleiades star cluster. When those stars rose before dawn, it was the cosmic alarm clock. Plant your maize now because the rains are coming. Their astronomy was so precise that they predicted when to sow crops centuries in advance. Quirky tidbit: some rural Maya communities still whisper blessings to maize before eating tamales. They tap the tortillas gently, like knocking on a door, to wake the spirit within. Imagine apologizing to your sandwich before biting it. "Hey buddy, thanks for the carbs." Here's the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether everyday farmers truly understood the complex calendar mathematics, or if they simply followed priestly advice disguised as divine decree. Did villagers know they were syncing life with the Pleiades, or did they just trust the guy in the jaguar headdress who said, "Trust me, the stars approve"? You glance again at the Helfta diary tucked under your arm. The nun's neat entries of fasting, feasting, and prayer suddenly rhyme with these maize cycles. Sister Matilda writes, "Lent begins, the bread is dry, our voices low." Meanwhile, a Maya farmer scratches a note in dirt. "Rain has come, maize will grow, children will eat." One script on parchment, the other in soil. Two distant worlds, one identical need: to anchor fleeting life to a reliable rhythm. You smile, thinking about how Sister Gertrude might react if you explained the Maya system. So their whole year is basically a giant corn clock. Gertrude blinks slowly. "We count days by saints, not stalks." Right, but also tacos. Gertrude crosses herself dramatically. The maize sways in a sudden gust, and you feel as though the field itself is answering. Time isn't abstract here, it's tactile. You can chew it, boil it, mash it, turn it into tortillas. Time becomes nourishment, each kernel a moment you swallow. The Helfta nuns consumed bread and wine as sacred time. The Maya consumed maize as sacred time. Different flavors, same hunger. You pause to listen. The field hums with crickets, and in that low drone, you swear you hear the whisper of numbers, cycles, prayers, chants. Both Helfta and Maya worlds understood something you often forget. Time isn't just passing. It's feeding you, shaping you, moving through your body like bread and maize. The horizon glows with the promise of sunrise, and you take one last breath of the maize-scented air. You step forward, carrying both the diary and the corn dust on your palms, realizing you're now walking inside a clock that is also a... You keep walking, and the neat rows of maize ripple into memory, the stalks dissolving into mist, until you find yourself back within the thick stone walls of Helfta. The winter air creeps in under the cloister arches, smelling faintly of candle wax and damp stone. A nun's voice echoes down the hall as she chants a psalm, her syllables dragging slowly, like the way time drags when you're watching the clock at work. Except here, the clock is a choir book, and the ticking is Latin vowels stretched across frosty mornings. The Helfta winter diary sits heavy in your hand. You flip it open, and the ink scratches speak again. One entry notes, "The snow lies stubborn, the bread grows thin, yet our prayers stretch longer." You imagine the writer's cramped fingers dipping a quill into ink while her breath fogs in the icy air. Each sentence is a little survival tactic, an attempt to make sense of the hunger and the endless nights. Mainstream fact: The Helfter convent, founded in the mid-13th century in Saxony, became famous for its mystic writers like Gertrude the Great and Mechthild of Hackerborn. Their diaries and visions offered some of the earliest female theological voices preserved in Europe. Quirky tidbit: monks and nuns sometimes wrote marginal doodles in their manuscripts, tiny rabbits, snails jousting knights, even smiley faces that feel suspiciously modern. Imagine Sister Gertrude carefully sketching a little cat in the corner of her diary just because she was bored during prayers. Historians still argue whether the Helfter diary entries were personal reflections or carefully curated records meant to serve as spiritual propaganda. Was Sister Matilda really pouring her heart out, or was she writing what she thought future abbesses wanted to read? The truth probably lies somewhere between, just like your old social media posts were half genuine, half, "look how well I'm coping." You wander down the cloister, listening to the drip of melting snow into stone basins. The rhythm reminds you of the maize fields you just left. Drip, sprout, chant, harvest. Both Helfter and Maya lives orbit cycles. Neither had a weekend getaway, Netflix, or office parties to mark time. They had prayers, stars, bread, maize. You stop and picture the Maya farmer at dawn watching the Pleiades rise, thinking it's time to plant. Then you picture a nun at matins, rubbing her sleepy eyes, thinking it's time to chant. Both exhausted, both trusting a rhythm larger than themselves. You realize with a little sleepy grin that medieval time management tips might beat your modern calendar app. You pull your cloak tighter because the chill really bites now. In the candlelight, the diary pages flutter, and you catch a fragment. We measure days not by hours but by mercy. You whisper it aloud, and it feels like a lullaby. In Helfter, time was stitched together by prayers. In the Maya fields, time was braided by maize. Different languages, but both whispering the same secret. Survival requires rhythm, and rhythm requires faith. You laugh quietly to yourself, imagining trying to explain daylight savings to either side. So twice a year we move the clock hands for no cosmic reason. Maya farmer tilts head, stares blankly. Sister Gertrude crosses herself harder than last time. The diary page closes itself, and you feel the cloister fold around you like a blanket. You let the rhythms, prayer, harvest, snowfall, stars, lull you. Every beat is both scripture and fieldwork, both bread and maize, and you're drifting through the shared heartbeat of two worlds. The sound of bells follows you now, bronze voices carried on cold air. You glance upward as the Helfter bell tower fades into another horizon, and suddenly you're standing in a Maya plaza. The sun presses down like a solid weight, but the bells in your ears transform into conch shells being blown at the start of a ceremony. Time, it seems, has a habit of showing up with instruments. A priest traces glyphs onto bark paper codex, his hand steady as he marks the days. The people gather with baskets of maize, their offerings gleaming gold and white, kernels like pearls. Children chase each other around the plaza, their laughter breaking the solemn air, reminding you that no calendar, sacred or not, can completely silence childhood chaos. You almost trip over a stray dog who clearly doesn't care whether it's the 260-day ritual count or just a Tuesday. Mainstream fact: the Maya had not just one, but several calendars. The 260-day ritual calendar called the Tzolkin, the 365-day solar calendar, Harb, and the long count used for historical dates. They wove these together like interlocking gears, producing cycles upon cycles. It was a system so sophisticated that modern mathematicians still marvel at its precision. Quirky tidbit: archaeologists have found maize kernels deliberately placed in tombs, as though the dead would need snacks for the afterlife. You smile at the thought. Here's some corn, Grandpa. Good luck out there. It's like slipping a granola bar into a hiker's backpack before a long trail, except the trail is eternity. Historians still argue whether the Maya calendars were strictly religious tools or also pragmatic farming almanacs. Some say priests monopolized the system to maintain control. Others argue that every farmer and midwife could read the signs just as well. The truth probably swings like a pendulum between both. After all, who wouldn't want to know the right time to plant corn and when to hold a good festival? The plaza hums with color, red feathers, jade beads, maize piled high. You notice how the maize isn't just food but also a storybook. Every cob whispers of planting, rain, and harvest. It's as if the people measure time not with clocks but with meals. You smirk at the thought of replacing your wall calendar with a line of slowly eaten corn cobs. Oh, that must have been August. I had popcorn twice that week. The conch shell sounds again, and the priest raises his arms, speaking words that fold the crowd into reverence. You don't need to know the language. The cadence itself tells you a cycle has turned. It could be a day, a season, or a century. Either way, it's time. Your mind flickers back to Helfta. The bells, the psalms, the diary. Two very different scripts, yet both doing the same thing. Writing humanity's need to hold on to rhythm. The Maya carved stone stele with dates. The nuns inked parchment with visions. You chuckle softly, realizing both were basically saying, "Don't forget, today matters." As you wander the plaza, your steps sync with the drumbeat of ceremony. You feel the kernels crunch beneath your sandals, each one a reminder that life here is timed by corn. A Maya farmer passes by and nods to you, holding a bundle of maize. You can almost hear him whisper, "Time grows from the ground." And you can't help but answer, under your breath, "So does faith." You blink, and the bright Maya plaza dissolves into a twilight sky. The stars stretch wider now, pulled across the horizon like a net. You feel as if you're walking between two calendars at once, the measured bells of Helfta behind you and the maize-patterned constellations of the Maya above. Each step crunches on frost that might just as easily be dry husks of corn. A nun's voice drifts into your ear, her winter diary entry, something about longing for spring, for warmth, for divine light. You nod, knowing the Maya priest would nod too, though his version would be a prayer for rain, maize, and the continuation of cycles. Both are scratching lines into the great ledger of time, and both are slightly annoyed that weather won't cooperate. Mainstream fact, in the 13th century, the Helfta convent was known as a hub for mysticism. Women like Gertrude the Great and Mechthild of Hackeborn wrote texts describing visions of Christ in language so vivid that later scholars called them bridges between heaven and earth. Their diaries weren't just private musings, they became guides for entire communities. Quirky tidbit, Maya farmers sometimes used live turkeys as weather predictors. If the turkey fluffed up or grew restless, it might mean rain. It's the medieval equivalent of checking the weather app, except your app also pooped in the courtyard. You wonder whether Helfta's nuns, who kept geese, ever tried the same thing. "Sister Agnes, the goose looks agitated. Better bring in the laundry." Historians still argue whether mystical visions in Helfta were purely psychological experiences or actual socially shaped rituals. Did Gertrude really see Christ in burning light, or was she trained to frame her inner feelings in the language of revelation? Similarly, scholars debate whether Maya timekeeping was truly mathematical genius or mythic narrative cleverly disguised as math. In both cases, maybe the answer is yes to both. You stroll further and the landscape starts to braid. A field of winter rye becomes a field of maize. A frozen ink pot turns into a carved stellar stone. Your footsteps alternate between chapel tiles and packed earth plazas. You find yourself laughing softly. It's absurd, really, that humanity has spent centuries building elaborate countdown systems only to realize that no matter what, you still just get hungry 3 times a day. The nun whispers from her diary again, describing her night prayers in the cloister. The candles flicker, the pages turn, her heart beats steady. The Maya priest answers in your other ear, chanting glyphs of time, maize cycles, and celestial alignments. The overlap is so close that you can't tell where one voice ends and the other begins. It's almost a duet separated by oceans and centuries, yet humming in the same key. And you realize something. Both calendars, both diaries, both systems are just lullabies for anxious humans trying to cradle themselves through the endless dark. They mark time so you don't feel lost. They tell you that yes, another day will come, and yes, your little life is part of something vast. You smile, stretch, and keep walking, feeling the weight of centuries loosen from your shoulders like snow melting off a branch. The path softens under your feet now, as if time itself is cushioning your steps. You've carried with you the Helfta Nun's winter diary and the Maya farmer's cornfield calendar, and both are beginning to feel less like curiosities and more like quiet companions. The night air is cool, brushing your cheeks with a mix of frost and the faint, warm smell of tilled earth. Somewhere a bell rings, though it might just as easily be a conch shell. The nun's hand trembles as she writes by candlelight, describing her yearning for union with God. The ink freezes if she pauses too long, so her words become urgent, pressed into parchment as though carved in ice. At the same time, a Maya elder steps into his field, reading the growth of maize like scripture. He knows when to sow, when to wait, when to give thanks. Both are grasping for a rhythm, a divine reassurance hidden inside cycles they can almost, but not quite, control. Mainstream fact, both Europe and Mesoamerica anchored time to the body's relationship with the seasons. In Helfta, fasts and feasts aligned with liturgical calendars. In the Maya world, festivals mapped directly onto the agricultural year. Food and faith, hunger and harvest all merged into the ticking of unseen clocks. Quirky tidbit, some Maya rituals involved dressing maize cobs in tiny woven garments before burying them as offerings. Imagine slipping a little poncho onto your dinner ingredient before planting it back in the dirt. Meanwhile, Helfta's nuns embroidered altar cloths with care, convinced that adorning sacred objects mattered to the divine. Across oceans, people were basically accessorizing their hope. Historians still argue whether mystical writings like Gertrude's Herald of Divine Love should be treated as theological masterpieces or intimate journals. Likewise, debates rage over whether Maya calendar inscriptions were empirical data records or mythic storytelling encoded in stone. Perhaps both answers work because maybe time is both personal and cosmic. You walk further into the braided landscape. The chapel bells slow down, their chime syncing with the thump of maize mortars in Maya villages. The frost dissolves into dew. You realize that what you've been reading, whether diary lines or carved glyphs, is less about measuring time and more about softening its edge. The nun reassures herself with scripture, the farmer reassures himself with corn. And here you are, centuries later, reassuring yourself with their reassurance. A smile tugs at your lips. It's comforting, isn't it? To know that long before smartphones and calendars that beep at you with dental appointment reminders, people were still stumbling through winters, still worrying about crops, still craving the divine rhythm beneath the mess. And the truth is, you'll do the same. You'll look at your watch tomorrow. You'll count down days to something. You'll mark anniversaries, because without it, time feels too big. With it, time feels like a lullaby. And so, with the nun's candle guttering low and the farmer's maize glistening in moonlight, you set the diary down. The last line is simple but powerful, a reminder that all calendars end with rest. Now the sounds grow dim, almost like they're retreating into memory. The bells fade into the night air, the rustle of maize fields softens, and even the scratching of a quill on parchment grows faint. You notice how the silence doesn't feel empty. It feels protective, like a blanket drawn up to your chin. You picture the nun at her desk, finally closing her diary for the night. Her candle flickers one last time, then fades. She leans back, folds her hands and drifts into sleep. Her winter worries, her prayers, her visions, all of it slides gently into the quiet. At the same time, imagine the Maya elder. He smooths the soil with his palm, reassured by the stars above. His calendar counts, his maize grows, and though questions remain, when it will rain, how plentiful the harvest will be. He also lets them go for tonight. He steps inside, the night cradling his village in calm. You follow them both, feeling your own body grow heavy with rest. The cycles of time, whether written in ink or carved in stone, are just markers to help you surrender. The worries of today fold into the larger rhythm, a rhythm that whispers, you are part of something vast, and you are allowed to let go. So breathe slowly now, let your muscles soften, your thoughts scatter like leaves. Trust the calendar of your own heartbeat, trust the diary of your own breath, and when you close your eyes, know that you are held in the same long story that once comforted a nun in a frozen cloister and a farmer in a maize field. Sleep well.